Welcome to Dental Profits. For today, we're going to talk about the solution you need to the most common challenges that you're having.
Staff management issues, not controlling your schedule,
Treatment acceptance, patients not showing up, and much, much more. We're going to give you a solution. Stay with us. Hi, folks. I'm Sean Crabtree.
and I'm Cameron Bailey,
Welcome into Growth Profits.
coming to you live each week.
We don't want to change the way you do business.
We want to change the way you're thinking about your business.
We want you to have better results, happier clients, and make more money.
Let's get it started.
Hi, folks. Welcome into Dental Profits. I am your host, Sean Crabtree, along with my co-host,
Cameron Bailey.
and today we're going to talk about one of the most important topics that we could talk about. Now, in the intro, we talked about staff management challenges. Raise your hand if you're having those. If you're driving down the road, yep. Not controlling the schedule, right? Treatment acceptance opportunities, patients not showing up. We're going to talk about the solution to all of those things and the solution to much, much more. And you ready for what that is? It is a failure to communicate.
What we have here is a failure to communicate.
It is a failure to communicate.
What does a failure to communicate mean, dude? We hear that all the time, right? What does it mean, Sean?
Here's what we find in every service business that we're in. There are lots of communication things throughout the course of a day about doing stuff. Or we need to do a better job or whatever. Listen, a failure to communicate when it comes to the big picture results means that we're not on the same page. We're not addressing issues where it is that they live. And so what we want to talk about in this particular episode, is that what it's called?
The episode, Dental Profits.
In this episode, we want to give you a handful of things that you can implement right away. But first, you got to recognize that stuff that does not get talked about on a regular basis does not get done. Now, we mentioned just several big things: staff management challenges, not controlling the schedule, treatment acceptance, patients not showing up.
You could implement all kinds of challenges into that category.
We can incorporate all sorts of things with that.
How communication goes in most dental practices is Peggy walks in and says, "Good morning." And then Peggy walks out the door and says, "See you tomorrow."
And that's pretty much it. There's communication with the patients. There's communications with the customers in other organizations.
Communication with insurance companies. Communication.
Everybody loves that kind of communication.
Yeah. Communication with the insurance companies. Talking to the patients. Talking to your SEO people. Talking to all kinds of people except the people that matter the most.
Right.
And that's the people in your business.
And so, we did an episode not long ago about addressing the obvious, and we talked a little bit about that. But when it really, the thing I want you to understand is really we run into this all the time. The backbone of your organization is communication, and everything comes out from that particular scenario. So whether we're talking about any of these things we mentioned, staff management issues, the schedule, all of these things, it starts with open and consistent communication. If you understand that, which I think everybody who's listened would agree with that and understand it, but you got to look at communication a little bit differently. It's not communication in terms of you do this and you do that and you do the other thing. It's communication on a much higher level. It's communication in terms of, let's figure out and communicate who is responsible for taking ownership in certain areas of the practice. That's the first level of communication. We also need to communicate in terms of what are, for lack of a better word, what are the ground rules for how it is that we're going to communicate?
Exactly.
Okay? I mean, we've got to have the expectations clearly laid out in terms of how we're going to communicate. We also have to have the ground rules laid out in terms of when we're going to communicate.
That's step one. Step one is you got to create a time to communicate. The reason that most practices out there don't communicate these challenges, and when we get the phone call to us, and it says, "Hey, Cameron, what do you do about I got staff management issues?" Or, "Cameron, I'm seeing a bunch of new patients, but my treatment acceptance sucks." Right? Those phone
That's
calls.
That's a Tennessee term, by the way.
Those phone calls that
you're
we
welcome
get,
to use that. Sucks.
Those phone calls we get all the time. In the back of our head, we're thinking, have we set aside time to communicate about these challenges? Have we set aside a time that that is the time that we work on our business versus working in our
So
business.
what is your suggestion, Mr. Bailey, in terms of when we should incorporate that time and how should it look?
You got to have a meeting. I would have a meeting every week.
Every week.
Every week for an
Man,
hour.
I don't have time for a meeting.
You don't have time for a meeting because you haven't made time for a meeting. You haven't put the priority where it needs to be. I would submit that you don't have time not to have a meeting.
I would agree, because that meeting time allows you to communicate through issues and opportunities and challenges and come together at a much higher level. Now, if you're listening to this and you're going, yeah, that sounds like a lot of BS.
Nah. Dude, I guarantee you, if you go out there and you take a poll.
Yeah? You want to take a poll?
How many super high-end, no, I shouldn't say super, how many super profitable practices that you know?
Or service organizations in general.
Or in general.
They communicate at a very high level.
And they probably, if you were to take a poll, have a team meeting at least once a week. They probably have a time where they get everybody together.
And if you're doing it once a month, not working.
It's not working. It's not enough. It's not enough time. You can't. You don't have time and consistency to create any type of accountability when you're only going on a monthly basis.
And so Cameron's saying the rule number one is you have to have a set aside time. Weekly time is a great. A weekly meeting is a great time to do that. Set aside a particular day and a particular time, and every single week, that's the meeting time. Now, to get to that place in your head, though, you may have to communicate with yourself a little bit. I understand that in order for us to take care of our patients at the highest level and have all of these 4 areas that we mentioned and all the other areas maximized, we've got to communicate with each other at a much higher level before we're going to be able to make those things stick in terms of success with our patients in all these other areas. We have got to be communicating at a very high level. I can tell you that one of the challenges that we see, just as a quick sidebar, is the communication or lack thereof in a lot of practices is because there's no responsibility given out. There's this kind of unspoken book somewhere that I don't know where it's written, but people in dentistry have this automatic knowledge that this thing here, that's a
front desk thing.
That's a front thing. I don't do that. I don't know anything about that. Don't bring that to me. This thing back here, that's a hygiene thing. That's an operative thing. That's a back thing.
That's a clinical thing. I do that.
Right. Listen, if we're going to be the best we can be in terms of the schedule, treatment acceptance, confirmations, reinstatement, all of these areas in your practice, throw all that stuff out the window and let's recommunicate. Not in terms of who's doing what. Let's communicate in terms of who's responsible for what. And then the person who's responsible for whatever that area is can communicate the stuff that needs to be done and who's going to do it.
Right now, in most businesses, in most practices, what happens is you don't have anybody responsible for a certain area. Who's responsible?
Everybody,
the doctor's responsible.
It's everybody just does work.
Yeah.
And what we find is there's all these little small territories of, this is a back thing, I do this, that's a front thing, you do that, I don't know anything about that, don't bring that to me. And it builds these, these silos of, just stuff that piles up to do. We got to eliminate the do, and we got to put communication in its place. Communication is the salve for all wounds.
For that big wound, that salve.
It is the salve.
I got a great story about this.
Okay.
There's a great story. We just started working with a new client recently. It's a great practice. It's a great team, but all of the responsibility, all of the decisions, all of the pressure, all of the challenges, all of the opportunities are sitting on the doctor's shoulders.
And there's no communication.
So the doctor just takes on more and more and more. And what happens is stuff doesn't get done.
And
she hired us to bring her some systems. She wanted systems.
Even if stuff does get done, it's not maximized.
Right.
There's no way on earth it's maximized. And if you think about it in a general conversation like this, it makes sense. If I'm the owner of the business and that's the environment, what Cameron just talked about, if that's the environment I have, then I don't have partners who are all working together. What I got is people running to me all the time, asking me, what do I do this? What do I do for this? What do I do for that? How do I handle this? Where do I go with this? What do you want me to do about this? So if you think it's just a big log jam, there's no way to be successful at the highest level when one person is handling everything and everybody else is carrying out wishes. There's just no, one person doesn't have the information, and there's no way that can be communicated at the highest level. So
when we were in our team meeting, when we were our first team meeting with this practice, we just recently had it, and we used the analogy that right now the way that communication is happening in this practice is the doctor finds a challenge, finds an opportunity that's not maximized, or really the hygienist or the assistant or even the administration staff runs to the doctor with a challenge, right? And drops it at her feet. And then we all run and put out that one fire. But then when we get that fire put out, there's another fire over here that we have to run to and put that fire out. And then we go put another fire out. And then all we're doing all day long is putting out fires. There's no systematic approach for responsibility to flow to my team so that then we can communicate openly, honestly, and directly about what's working and what's not.
So what we have is a failure.
A major failure.
To communicate.
And
if we're going to communicate, step one is get a set-aside weekly time to be able to do that. Same time, same channel, every week. Step two.
For an hour. And I would be so bold to say that even if you have to shrink your patient time to find that hour, you need to do it.
Well, of course.
You need to shrink. You need to shrink your time.
Because that hour can save you hours throughout the course of a week. So set aside that time.
Profits, dental profits.
Right. Realize that your productivity is not based simply on butts in the chair. Your productivity is based on your ability to come together and maximize the team, the time, and the resources that you have. So step one, set aside that time. Step two, communicate in your own mind communicate to yourself. Does that make any sense at all?
Self-talk. Give yourself some self-talk.
Communicate with where we're trying to go here. Communicate in your own mind that is a number one priority. Okay, I've got to prioritize communication. And then here's the second thing we tell you to do. When you go to that first meeting, don't communicate in terms of who's doing what. Communicate in terms of who's responsible for what, and let's create a culture of open and consistent communication. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty real quick.
The nitty-gritty.
The granular details, okay?
Drop it. I'm ready.
We got to communicate directly at issues. Here's the biggest challenge that you're going to run into. If you've got to set aside time, that's great. If you're prioritizing communication, that's great. Now, here's the one thing you got to be aware of. I would pick somebody on your team to go, you know what? You are the moderator. You are the person who is the sergeant at arms when it comes to the meeting. We cannot get into discussion.
Yeah.
So,
hold on.
Yes.
What is discussion? Here's the thing. A lot of people, you say we can't get into discussion.
What
but
does discussion mean?
Right now, Sean Crabtree, the only thing that's going on in my practice is discussion because I'm the leader and I'm coming to the table. If I'm coming to the table at all and I'm saying, hey guys, what do you think we should do about this?
Right.
And what happens? Well, I think this. Well, I think this. Well, that will never work. Well, this will work. Well, that'll never work. Or it worked here, but we know our patients won't do that. Our patients can't afford that. Our patients won't say that.
And now we're out of time.
We got nothing handled. We spent an hour talking about one challenge, and we got nothing. We got no solution.
So that's why I said one of the things you got to do before this is decide who's responsible for what, and now clean up your communication. Whoever's going to be the sergeant,
I like that.
Whoever's going to be
write that. I'm gonna write that.
Clean up
communication. Casey, write that down. We got to clean up communication, bro.
You like that, Case?
I do.
Okay.
All right.
So if we're going to clean up communication, right? Then you got to start with making sure who's responsible for what. And now your communication is very much on purpose, right? You are communicating directly to somebody, not to everybody. You have somebody responsible for each piece. You're communicating to somebody specifically about a challenge in their area. And you're not asking open-ended, big kinds of stuff. Because like Cameron said, hey, y'all, what do you think we should do about this? Now we're off to the races, man. It's into discussion, right? You want to have a direct request, right? You want to share some information. Hey, just want you guys to know, moving forward, I'm over the treatment acceptance area. So moving forward, what we're going to do is, before we bring the doctor back, we're going to do a preclinical examination of what's most important to the patient. And we're going to get all that handled before the doctor comes in. that'd be something great to share with the team, right? And that's also taking responsibility. The other thing you want to implement in part of your teams is acknowledgments, things that are really working, right? Point somebody out in terms of something great, in terms of the way they're thinking or what they're doing. That's the way you communicate.
Or a result that they got.
Right.
Don't always have to acknowledge somebody for working hard if working hard's not getting them the result that they need. Right. We got to acknowledge somebody for the results and figure out a way to work smarter instead of harder.
So in most situations, when it comes to communication with your patients, whether that's financial arrangement, whether that's chair-side treatment acceptance, whether that's what's most important about your teeth, you're asking these big open-ended questions. When it comes to a meeting, you're stating facts, you're sharing information
directly to the
person. You're not
person.
asking open-ended, big kinds of questions, because then you get off into a discussion. So number one, commit to a time that you're going to have a weekly meeting on a regular basis. Number two, when you get in there, communicate in terms of who is going to be responsible for what moving forward. Number three, then communicate directly to that person. I heard somebody say one time that, the worst possible scenario that can happen in communication is you think you're doing a good job. You come to a meeting, you got your whole team there, and you say a big blanket statement to a big bunch of people. Hey, guys.
What do you think we should do about this?
Or even a statement. Hey, guys, we need to do a better job of asking for referrals. And everybody goes,
yeah.
Yep. And then nothing happens, right? Now you have a person responsible for marketing. You're going to speak directly to that person. And you're going to speak to the point. So, Mary, you're over marketing. When do you think you could have a game plan specifically for how it is, who it is, and what it is that needs to happen in terms of asking for referrals? Great.
Now
let's write that down.
Yeah.
Now we're off to the next thing.
Now you have
action. That's how you keep moving.
You have action steps that are taking place. I know Sean mentioned something very, very quickly, and I wanted to touch on that. I don't want us to miss the point with that. When we're talking about influencing, and when we talk about sales strategies and things like that, we use open-ended questions. What and how, right? Because
use open-ended questions.
You need to be using when you're talking with your patient. You need to be using open-ended questions. What and how. So we want global, big questions. When you're talking to our team, we want to be direct. Mary, do you have a plan for this? Do you have a strategy for this?
And if not,
when can you come up with the strategy? Right? So that we're not globally just talking, we're directing and moving forward. Even if it's just a little bit each week, guys, that little bit will make such an impact in your staff management issues. It'll make such an impact when you're not controlling your schedule, in treatment acceptance, all of these challenges.
I can tell you the biggest challenge you're not going to have, or the biggest challenge you're going to have, are not the things that we're talking about right now and how to do it. The biggest challenge are the first couple of things. You got to prioritize communication. That means you've got to understand that it is the backbone. It's the most sacred thing that you have. You have to protect it. You have to, I think Dave Ramsey calls it love and own it. You got to love on communication.
Hey.
You got to realize that is your priority thing.
You got to clean up the communication, right, Casey?
And you got to clean up the communication. Next thing you got to do is because you understand the priority of it, you got to set a weekly time to have it. And the third piece of that is, as he said, clean it up and make sure that we're not getting into discussion. Part of that is having a sergeant at arms who is, overseeing this and looking at the dynamics all the time. You can tell when we're off into discussion mode. There should be one person speaking at a time. That person should be speaking directly to another person. And it's not even a two-person discussion. It's a direct request or a direct challenge or asking for something. When is this going to happen? And that's the way you do it. But like I said, the first two parts are the most important parts. And you know what? I'm thinking maybe we should make this a series. What do you think?
A series? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, we should probably look at how communication happens in terms of, staff management issues next time. And then we'll walk down the line. What do you think about that?
We can do that.
So next time, that's what we'll do.
The most important thing is that the communication affects the dental profits.
And that is what this show is all about. It's all about not letting you have a failure to communicate. It's about having you with happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride.
Guys, if you like our content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. TheCrabtreeGroup.com is our website. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to send us an email.
Reach out.
Give us a call.
Comment.
We love hearing from you.
See you next week, guys.